Sorry, I also realized I had to feed the cat. So
I like the cat. So we are starting. I know that you and I are giving advice to young people a lot.
yes.
And what I'd like to do is to have a video that lets people, before we talk to them, get a sense of how we think about things so we can help them better. And you and I care about young people a lot. We've spent our careers giving back. And so this is me broaching a lot of topics that I wish they knew about before having a call with me and you, because it
Mhm.
would save us time. And I think it would help other people that may not have a chance to have that call.
Yeah, good idea.
And what I want to start is, I know you are an incredible strategist and thinker, but you're also someone that gets stuff done, and you move forward, and you're fast and you're quick and you're smart. And there's this tension between like big ideas and bogos and all that stuff. And I just want to, like, when you think of strategist, do you think of like someone that's opining, or what, how do you think of that? How does someone like Sebastian, who's going to call you soon, think about strategist? Is that, I kind of want to start there.
Yeah, I think, I mean, conventionally, the perception of strategists, which until recently mine was as well, was somebody who does the thinking and then they stop. And the real world application is done by somebody else. And that's oftentimes how, in the corporate space, consulting agencies work, right? They give you the thinking, they give you a brilliant deck, blah, 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 and then the thinking stops. But my view of a real strategist or a strategist for these days is that there has to be boots on the ground experience, number one, that feeds into the strategy. So no strategist can only have become a strategist by sitting in an office. They have to have had operational executional experience, because unless you have that, you don't know what tiny piece is going to fall from the puzzle and mess up a strategy. For example, I may have the most brilliant looking shelf space strategy for a supermarket. I'm dumbing it down. But if I don't know what I'm going to do if there's a blank spot in one particular space because somebody's sales teams aren't very regular about servicing that place, everything will fall. That's just a very basic example. So that's one. The second thing is that, and that came from my own experience, and that's a learning I've had much later in life, is that I've always been a perfectionist. So it's always been go, 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 and everything has to be done to perfection. And back when I was setting up my first platform, which was around, talent economics, so women and gender equality in the workspace, equity in the workspace, when I went and presented to my first VC, they said, "You're thinking at college level when the world is still at kindergarten level." And I think those words apply to strategy as well. So we think that everybody who hears the strategy will be able to go along with us. And what we need to do is to break it down into bite-sized pieces for people to go along with it. And that can be frustrating. And that's not being a perfectionist. But it is what it is. You always have to go with the slowest key stakeholder in the room.
So everyone says, that quote about everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And then we're like, oh, this is just a deck. And everyone like throws the deck and says, let's just get it done. Given that kind of climate and attitude, what is the purpose of a deck anymore? What is the purpose of strategy anymore when there's always a hard driver that just ignores it?
I think it's to show both sides of the story. I think then a deck's picture doesn't become how are you going to achieve this, but that you can achieve this way, and these are the risks associated and opportunities. If you do it this way, this is what you'll gain, this is what you'll lose, and you can do it this way. So I can, if there's an if there are multiple M&As I'm looking at, then one option in that deck would be that I need to do it. I can do all 10 of them. It's going to take a number of years, but my ROI at the end of it is going to be much better than buying out one now, focusing on it now, and growing just that. So that it's execution oriented. It has an eye on the end game, but it leaves the decision making, which effectively you've done with the deck, but it leaves that decision opportunity in the hands of the decision maker, the hard driver. That's one way, but I'm sure there are multiple others as well.
And can you think about a time you're telling someone like a Sebastian or Chantal or the people that you're like, that you've made something that's been really executable? Like what's made it work at the execution layer?
Oh, so frustrating. Back to the point of making it bite-sized so that everybody can go along. Like, you can be the most brilliant person in the world. Your project will fail if you don't have people who can understand the concept and make it happen along with you. So, and therefore you have to go as slow as the slowest key stakeholder. And it's okay. People operate at different speeds. But that would be that's how you make sure the most brilliant idea in the world doesn't fail, number one. Number two, be ready to roll up your sleeves and do the dirty work. Nobody else is going to come do it for you. So you have to do it yourself as well. It just is.
So how do you be like inclusive of the slowest stakeholder, but not dumb down?
Break it up into bite-sized pieces. You can have a smart bite-sized piece. You can have a brilliant step, and explain it well until that slowest key stakeholder gets it. I guess it becomes a bit like the tortoise and the hare story, right? So then consistency comes in. Yeah. So
I know you kind of ran China in parts of your career. I'd love to know, like, how did that start? How were you given the opportunity? What was it like? Were you scared at first? I mean, how did you learn how to do that?
I was very scared. I'll tell you, so it was a great learning as well for me. So I was running EMEA. I was first running the marketing, innovation, and strategy for a very large chocolate manufacturer, American, by the way. And then I was given China as a stretch assignment, a key project in China. China at that point was the largest market for them outside of North America. I was living in Dubai, and I would go for 1 week to 10 days every month into China, into Shanghai, and live and work there. Very different culture. It was very scary because for the first 6 weeks that I went in and we were on a clock, nothing got done. I'd go in and I'd talk to this table of multiple cultures, multiple nationalities, multiple levels of experience around the table, and they just stare back at me. And I'd feel so silly. And 6 weeks later, I realized I'm a bit of a failure. I haven't managed to get anything done. And I also realized at that point, when I went back into the meeting in week number 7, that I was leading the wrong way. I was leading from the front. So I was so done. I had nothing left in my back pockets, no cards up my sleeve. And I said, all right, well, if you had to deliver this project, let's go around the table. How would you do it? The ideas started coming one by one by one. And I was like, whoa, where were these guys? When I was talking to them. And it comes from the culture, it's hierarchical, and then others fall in with the country culture. But when I let them have the room and they spoke, I realized my job was actually, as the only one who had access to the board, to the global board in the US, to shout out their names from rooftops if they did good stuff, and they'd get everything else done. So that built a trust and transparency atmosphere where these guys went the extra mile, because they knew if they do something, if they'd go the extra mile, I would make sure that people at the top would hear about it. And they would be on calls with me at 3 a.m. in the morning with the US, even though they didn't have to be.
Wow.
Stuff got messed up over the Chinese New Year one time when the AC accidentally got shut down. Our pilot products died, and there was a danger of the project being pushed back by 6 months. It didn't happen. These guys had backup. They found a solution. We lost only about 8 weeks. They reduced CapEx spend by finding projects we could piggyback on. Net. The project hit the market 1 year ahead of time. And we got about 50 million incremental in revenue, which at that point was pretty big. And the project was so successful that it then got pulled back to the head office in North America to be launched big time over there.
Wow. Did the team composition change or just the way you managed the team?
Just the way I managed them. It was me. And I've learned so much after that, because I've lived in after that. Then I took that learning back to Dubai, UAE. I then brought that learning to Europe here, where similarly people are closed, or cultures, there's a country culture trumps company culture. I mean, you can have an Apple office in the US, which will look very different from an Apple office in Asia or Europe or Australia or Africa. That's because company culture trumps. So Europe in itself, as we know, is there's money to be made, but it's conservative, it's closed, and you have to let them come forward with the solutions and lead from behind. It's almost shepherding, or it doesn't mean you miss timelines, but if you communicate the timelines and if people are engaged enough, they make sure they deliver on those timelines.
So when you think about all your leadership roles, which has been a lot, which one did you have the most fun in?
I had fun in where I had my own business, and that was the gender equity platform. So I led that. That was a lot of fun. There was a lot of risk. There was a lot of learning there as well. But then I also had fun in a second role where I had. It was my first role when I came to the Middle East, because I moved to the Middle East from Pakistan after running that business. I was ambitious. I needed a regional strategic role. And I moved there. And the fun of it was that basically I was told it can't be done for multiple reasons. I was the first woman in that kind of a role. The brand was the biggest brand portfolio for that business. And it had been in the red for a while, and people had tried to reverse it and couldn't. And I love those sort of challenges where I'm and basically where you can say, hold my beer, whatever. But it means a lot of work, yeah. So you can say that, but then you have to make sure people trust you. You take them along, hence the slowest key stakeholder, and that it's executionable and that you're able to change. You have to listen and learn as you go, and basically keep showing the team you're working with the end goal, that what happens if we achieve that. If people see, and I saw this in my own work as well, so the social enterprise side as well as the corporate and business side, if something is going to impact me personally, I will do something about it. Now, personally can mean my pocket, personally can mean people I love. If I am going to be impacted, I will do something about it. And that's, by the way, how you make private enterprise change. On social enterprise issues, if people feel that they will be hurt, or there's a bonus linked, or there is recognition that then grows their careers, they will be engaged, or their businesses. Similarly, of course, in business, if this is going to make them the stars of the organization, or if they're entrepreneurs, if this is going to get them on the 30 under 30 or 40 under 40 list, they'll do it. So you just have to, whenever you have an end result in mind, but you have to, for me, this is how I work. Of course, people have multiple ways. You always have to keep in mind what's going to engage the stakeholder that you are talking to at that point in time. Because otherwise, and we all know, for example, something may be a good thing to do or the morally right thing to do, but I won't do it because day to day, it doesn't affect my work. How do I get it into that upper square of the Eisenhower matrix? The important and urgent on my list is by making sure it has a positive outcome for the person you're talking to as well.
So it must have been different going from corporate to private equity in the sense of the dynamics of the everyday and the team compositions is different.
Yeah, very, very different. Yeah. That was my second freak out.
Yeah.
I was like, because I'd come from corporate and I'd had my own enterprise, but then I'd had resources to build up that own business. And this one I was thrown in, I was asked to set up 2 divisions. and said, here you go find a portfolio, go find the teams we need, whatever assets you need, resources, keep it within this budget. And by the way, for one of them, we need X million at the end of the year. For the other, we need Y million. Along the way, you can look at M&As, but you have to do the due diligence and you have to work on the cap tables with us. And at the start, I didn't even know what those words really meant. I'd seen them, but the CFO had always controlled them. And what you learn is that you handle it as your own business. So it's very, very different from corporate, very different. Corporate, you have guardrails, you have systems and processes. You go in, you present, you take your salary at the end of the day. In a private equity, you have to make sure that you operate on two fronts. So for me, I was operating on setting up a business. So I needed interim resources. We couldn't wait until we'd got we'd reached minimum thresholds for external vendors to give us lower prices. We couldn't wait. We couldn't wait for an internal sales team, so I had to hire an external sales team. So we actually went out and found the right portfolios that we could pick up, rebrand. We piloted them first. I gave major margins. I'm now talking consumer goods to our distributors, which are the people who will get it out into the markets, and said, when we reach a certain threshold, I will give you this. And it was completely opposite to what I'd done in corporate. But you have to think in two streams. Similarly, for the other division, which was longevity and life sciences, we had to expand. We wanted to build an ecosystem, and it was all about getting in the right partners, but also having them on board with us in a way that didn't bankrupt us. So we piggybacked on their technology, their know-how up to a level, and then the proportions of the return switched. And then finally, tech. It was all about having creating tech platforms that will make things easier, however complex and messy and chaotic it's on the inside of the business. To the external consumer, it's something that a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old can operate. And we had tech platforms for both of them. One was for the direct to consumer, so D2C. The other was to create an ecosystem where you had a tech platform that could go from not just identifying what you wanted to look like or wear that day, but also how you want it to be for a certain function, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm just hypothesizing. The point is that my question to the teams every time would be that if I was an 8-year-old, how would you explain this to me? So however chaotic it is, and what I've learned is along the way, and this is really important, that the more of an expert you are at doing something, the simpler the language you use. And I found I was able over the years now to start discerning within tech which of the teams I worked with or hired, which ones were actually smart, simply by how quickly and how simply they could explain the concept. And as soon as one of them went off into jargon and blah, I knew that actually that person was not very confident and not very secure deep down. They may have been somewhat subject matter experts, but the operative word is somewhat. Where real guys, they made it so simple that you get it like that.
So I love to kind of interject on kind of one of the key lessons around simplicity and expand a little bit on some of the fundamentals and basics that we wish that young people had. And I'd just like to hear you, because you, as an executive, as an investor, as a leader, you've experienced many early career folks. You know how I feel about follow-up. That's like my hot button. Hot button. I need fast follow-up. What are some of your things that are so ingrained as fundamentals that you may even forget that are wisdom? For young folks. Yeah, someone's 20, 21, 25. They're watching this. They're going to talk with you. You want them to kind of know this is part of the playbook.
Never take anyone in the network you're introduced to for granted. Number one. Somebody has gone out of their way to make an introduction for you, to make a connection. At the very least, even if you find at that point in time it is not useful for you, thank both the people that made the connection and the person you were connected to, because you never know when in the future you may need them again. This is critical. And it's not wisdom, it's something we do automatically. But I think I've seen a lot of young people forget to do it. Number one. Number two, if you don't believe in something and you're skeptical about it working, doesn't mean it's not going to work, because you're not that old or that experienced. So I would say define one or two things that you're doubtful about, but give it a shot. So if somebody's given you advice about how you should consider looking or doing a certain project and you're like, don't have time, they don't know what they're talking about, I'm actually pretty happy, don't go silent. Seen a lot of people do that. A lot of young people do that. Do it anyway. Do it in your own time, but for God's sake, do it. Why is this important? It takes you out of your comfort zone because you're uncomfortable doing it. You are taking a risk by doing it because you're using up resources, i.e. time, your own time. But for God's sake, cultivate that, discipline inside yourself to do it, to try it.
You think the sense of urgency can be taught? Can you make people urgent, or are they just by the time they come to you in a corporate setting, they're just wired that way?
I'll tell you a story that a coach of mine who I really, really respect, his name is Philip McKernan. He shared this story with us when I first joined his group, and he's Irish, and he met a guy who was sitting outside a pub in Ireland, and the guy had a dog at his feet. Old man, and he had a dog who was at his feet. He was sitting on a chair outside, and the dog was sitting on a nail. And McKernan pointed out to the old man, he said, your dog's on a nail. Why don't you move him? And the old man looked up at him, smiled, and said, when it hurts enough, he'll move himself. And I think I keep going back to that in my head. It's such a great analogy for creating a sense of urgency. When it hurts enough is when people will move. When it becomes personal, or when it impacts my pocket, when it affects somebody I care about or me, or it impacts my stability, that's when I'll get the real sense of urgency. And once I've learned that, then I will never forget that lesson.
So kind of coming back to what we talked about almost initially, which is this idea of the strategist that thinks versus the strategist that does. It's not does, it does. Sometimes you gotta go, you gotta make it happen. You gotta SEAL Team 6. How do you, or whatever analogy you want to use with that, when you are a strategist, but you're working with a hard driving executor, how do you balance those two, like BOGO versus, maybe you can explain that, BOGO versus legacy? Like how do you hold subtlety and nuance while driving hard at the same time?
By being objective, so removing emotion, and keeping an eye on the collective end goal. So what do I mean by that? I mean that you can get execution done, but if there's an end goal of getting the brand to a certain level, as well as numbers, then that needs a mix, as an example, of both strategy and execution. Strategy will define the pathway, typically. Strategy will define the how, execution will define the what. Neither can work without the other. If you remove, and I've seen so many senior people as well say, that guy is so difficult to work with, blah, blah, blah. I think it's difficult, but it's important to remove the emotions. Try to think of that person as just a resource and say, they're probably really nice in real life. Let's leave that side out. If they irritate me, it's not them irritating me. It's a certain behavior. That behavior is probably triggered by something in their background, some fear, some concern. I don't know what that is. Maybe I want to get into it. Maybe I don't want to get into it. But I think that's critical to keep the objectivity. Collective goal, at the end of the day, you win some, you lose some. You have to give and take. You may not, if I'm the strategist, I don't have the whole picture. If I'm the operator, I don't have the whole picture. And again, that's where the risk-taking piece comes in as well. As long as there's a collective goal and as long as there's an agreement that a quick pivot will happen if something starts to go wrong, and what that defining point is, it will work. Now, what's really critical in this kind of a thing, back to China, is the trust and transparency. So however much you hate a guy, you need to know that the person, however much you hate a guy or a girl, I say generically, a person's way of behaving in the office, you really need to deperson the task at hand and know you've got each other's backs. You know, you can go for each other's throats outside the workplace, but for that task, you're both delivering. I think politics comes in when there are too many people fighting for too small a perceived space. And if you can get rid of, that's where politics kicks in. And what you're essentially talking about, strategist and operator, is, you know, two ways of doing things. Why there's, and that's normal in teams. There's storming when a team comes together, norming when they understand each other. I love you, I don't like that, but I'll tolerate it because we'll get to the same goal. And then performing as a team. And that's where the objectivity and focus on the end goal comes in. And a bit of humor thrown in along the way, you know, some fun. And I don't mean going out for drinks, humor in the, I don't know, just jokes, just jokes to conclude or begin the talk.
So I love humor, and I guess two more questions. One is, you know, humor across cultures and company norms is an art form.
Mm-hmm.
Making it land it can be a challenge.
No, you're right. And corporate improv, by the way, corporate improv training is growing over the past several years for this reason, because it's challenging. It's an art form. You can't offend people, but you've got to, you know, make the atmosphere or environment conducive to both sets of teams, or all teams working. I started learning how to improvise. I was very left brain, and I started learning how to improvise back in 2017. And 2017. And what it did for me was, and I would really recommend, it put life in perspective, because some of the first things you learn when you're improvising is not to panic in your head, and how you have to rely on your partner to save you. When they see you in trouble, they give you a gift of a statement or some prop. And honestly, you can pick that up and put that into the workplace itself. So I'll give you an example. Some years ago, I led a team where we had the strategy guys and the sales guys, and we were in trouble. And it's those are the two most opposing forces you can have at the same time, rolling plays at each other. And I put up a poster before, or a paper on the top of the screen, the main screen, the whiteboard, and I said, look, it said yes and they walked in and they said, what's this? So, and Naheed with the silly improv ideas again. I said, well, every single idea, there will be no buts. By the way, I am a no but person as well. But for this, I needed the two to work together. And I myself wanted to learn. Maybe a no but to me is actually a yes and. I said, every single idea will be answered with a yes and. And I was a facilitator, so if I saw it going off into a different direction, what I had pre-decided with my boss was that I would then at some point park it in the parking bay, but we would leverage it. And that's the kind of improv that then starts to come in. And then you throw it in, you say, well, guys, we're going to have, it's a bit of improvising, we'll do a yes and then you start to throw in role play. So what I also did was, at one point, and this was just before lunch, there was a big clash that happened in that meeting between the strategists, despite the yes and then I did a role play. I did the role play of a conversation between the strategy side and the sales side, and they were groaning. They said, we don't have time. I said, it'll take 5 minutes, 2 minutes and 2 minutes. I took 2 strategists to do the same role play, and I took 2 of the operators, the sales teams, to do the same way. And done within 5 minutes. And the way they addressed the same question, which was given, was completely different. The objective of that was obviously to illustrate. And I said, okay, now go off. And now we have lunch. And over lunch, they discussed how the 2 paths were different. And when we came back, and usually, lunchtime is usually the post lunch is the graveyard shift. But it was actually a very active and it was a collective effort, because people realized that the other side wasn't talking against them just so that they could meet their targets. They actually thought differently, and that builds objectivity.
So I actually have 2 more questions, which we can do really quickly, and then ask me a question. 2 more questions. So question 1 is, and this is not one you can do quickly, but I'll ask you to do it quickly.
Okay.
With the pressures, the personalities, the politics, the get it done, the revenue, the quarterly, how do you keep your kind of heart intact working in an environment that can be sometimes caustic? How do you protect that thing in the middle of your chest and keep yourself centered and healthy when there's so much pressure to perform? How do you do that to a young person that's asking you this?
You understand that it's not personal.
But it feels personal.
It feels personal.
It feels very personal. Someone's yelling at you and saying stuff, and how do you not be a human? It's like,
I've got kids at uni, so young people. One of them is about to graduate in December, and it does feel personal. I felt it was personal when I was their age. It's called empathy, right? And it's hard, because at that age, it's all about us, and we take everything personally. If you can just maybe carry a paper or have it somewhere near you that, do I think this person might be having a bad day? Maybe something happened. Maybe they had an accident on the way in. Maybe they got some bad news. Or maybe they're just feeling unwell. I think just bringing in that side of things, if you've had a bad day, number 1. Number 2, what's really critical is just to have the clarification conversation. I'm amazed by how few young people these days, actually, they will crib about a bad discussion or a bad session, but they won't go and clarify. Go clarify. Say, look, I just want to make sure I understood what you said. Repeat it back to them if you don't want to say that it bothered me how you spoke with me, although I have yet to, in all my years, meet somebody anywhere in the world who, when you say it bothered me how you spoke to me, will say, oh, you deserved it. They'll always say, oh, sorry, wasn't meant to come across that way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think the best thing is to go across and have that conversation and say, look, can you clarify, this is what you meant? Is this what I've taken? Because I've been working really hard on this, and, stand up for yourself. The second thing is, if you aren't brave enough to do that, or you don't get an opportunity to do that, then just remember that the person probably has some shit going on in the background, excuse the language, that you don't see. But do try to find an opportunity just to talk.
Okay. So last question, then ask me one.
Yep.
As concisely as possible, which is a big one. You're talking to a CEO or a CFO or whoever, and maybe you want to work there, maybe you don't. And they're all going to say the same thing. Got to do more with less, the pressure, the board, AI, disruption, blah, blah. Kind of where do you, what's your go-to place to start that you're going to add value? If you just ask a certain question or you kind of start digging, where do you start digging that kind of reveals, oh, that's where I should focus, because that's the low-hanging fruit that shows the value right away? Every conversation, got to do more with less, AI is disruptive, the board's pressure, it's going to be the same stuff. So where do you go to just get the fertile, oh, this is what the assignment should be?
Okay. You do your homework before you go into that meeting. You find out everything you can about that organization. You talk to people if you have to talk to them, if it's that important a meeting. You look up that company, you look up their results, you look up what the troubles are. It'll typically be two or three. I've never seen more than two or three. And you go in with responses prepared for those two or three, that if I could resolve this, and the question you begin with is, what's bothering you? Like if you had to pick just one of these to address to get you to your end goal, which space would it be? So that's one way of doing it, but it's non-exhaustive. There are many other ways of doing it.
And then ask me a question and we'll conclude.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I mean, I've learned so much from you, Zach, and I think you handle multiple people around the world. You handle stakeholders from from gazillionaires to people who are struggling and just getting out, and you approach them with the same respect and attitude. What's the biggest learning you've had from the top and the bottom, number one? And at which point do you decide to what's the behavior, regardless of top and bottom, that makes you decide, okay, I've given it enough energy, it's time for me to move on?
The last first and then the first last. I do not move on I don't do that very well. Usually it would be much later when I realize that I should have done it. I stay on way too long. I have a lot of hope that things will find their way smoothly forward, that people might change, that circumstances change them. And I don't have the insight until usually a year later. I mean, it takes a long time. I wish I was more skillful with that. I think when I finally realize it, I think that there's things I do very well and there's things I don't do very well. And if the person that I'm working closely with doesn't value what I do very well and what they really want instead is what is their words and their thinking re-articulated back to them, that's not a good fit for the kind of relationship that I want to be in. I want to be able to bring the perspective, the people, the network, the ideas that I uniquely can deliver, because that's what would make me irreplaceable to a relationship in terms of a business relationship. So that's when I realized that really what they're wanting is essentially just tier one thinking that's packaged and clear and crisp. Then that's not where I shine. I shine by bringing a different viewpoint and a different level of candor to the things that I create. So that's that. And with the highs and the lows, I really love people. I like helping people a lot. And I like seeing their potential, no matter at what level that is at. At the very, very highest level, the potential might be realizing that developing things and delivering things that aren't perfect still is important. I work with some incredibly high functioning, talented people that are still discovering that social media is about being vulnerable publicly, and that they don't need to produce every piece of content, that they can be real. And now that social media consists of podcasts that are 3 or 4 hours long, you can't perform for 4 hours. You just can't. No one can perform in a 4-hour conversation. That way of thinking in the world has changed. So I really help those kinds of people be more comfortable being vulnerable publicly. And then young folks that don't feel like they have something to add, that their voice isn't valuable, I just don't see it that way. They have unique perspectives and I want to encourage them to speak. And so I think it's helping people find their potential and step into it. That is what I get most excited by, whether that's the potential to be more vulnerable when you're, wow, big deal, or the potential to see that you're a big deal when people don't think that you are. So it's the same thing on both sides.
Very cool. I have one last question that just builds on that. So just coming out of that, to be successful today, and you're surrounded by young people by definition of being where you are, what are the 2 to 3 max values for success? And I would say the ones that go across both life and business, that you see in a young person and you think, okay, this person is going to go far.
So there's one that's like 100%, or is it 98%, and there's a couple that are 1% and 2%, or 1%, 1%. The number one is showing up. Showing up, showing up, showing up. I know, a new friend who I'm helping along the way, who's probably watching this, reached out to me cold on LinkedIn, and a lot of people do, and he wanted to have a meeting. And I said, I'm happy to meet with you if you meet me with my dog at 6:28 in the morning, 10 miles west of the city where you live. He showed up. And as a result, he earned my respect and my trust. And then every single thing he's done thereafter, it's a small thing, but he's done what he said he's going to do. And now my trust is really, really high. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but when I was starting out my career, one of the most powerful people I work with, before I was given an assignment, my job was to bring him coffee. And he had a particular order. He wanted 2 sugars and 2 things of cream. And I had to get it right. And he wanted it at 7:40 in the morning. And I had to do it 5 times. I didn't realize I was being tested, but I was being tested 5 times his coffee order. Now, maybe that doesn't fly in today's world, that kind of testing, but I showed up. This young man who I mentioned showed up. So that's the number one thing, is just showing up. I was on the phone with someone recently. They wanted a job. I liked the content. I was happy to talk to the venture capitalist who funded the company they wanted to work for. They had an opportunity. I presented it to them. All they had to do was show up. And they didn't realize that they were speaking to a person that knew the person that was there. So I guess show up. And then 2 is, you don't know who you're talking to. People have uncles and aunts and friends and nephews, and they go to school with folks. You don't know who you're talking to. You have no idea. So treat everyone with respect, not because it gives you an outcome, but because they deserve respect, and the outcomes will follow. Learn. And then number 3 is, learn to write. It's hard. Writing Without Bullshit is the book you should memorize. And then On Writing Well, those 2 books. And then the last thing is, have a point of view, have an opinion, say something. The thing is, you don't wait till you're important to have a point of view. You have a point of view, you cultivate it, and then you become important. So have a point of view and go test that out online. Just do. Get out there and do something. Build something. I went off on a rant.
No. So it fits so perfectly. So showing up, respecting people, everybody regardless, and then having a point of view, right or wrong, doesn't matter. Just have one. These 3 things. Yeah.
Yeah. So you and I have a lot of fun.
Yes, we do.
And we'll invite people to comment on the video. Any question that you like to be asked in general that people should ask you in a comment?
No. I actually had so much fun, Zach. Thank you. Yeah. But I hope it was useful for you.
Oh yeah. I learn. I mean, I get to learn with you every single day. I call you at 6 in the morning. I get to learn every day.
No, likewise. I love hearing. By the way, what happened with your the person I learned about yesterday, your client?
17. Oh, okay. So we'll hit pause right now.
Oh yeah. You cut off the end of